Thanks. Yeah. What a great venue. I'm going to just try and project because I've been told I need to speak more loud, and project myself. So if you can't hear, just give me a bit of a finger and I'll raise my voice. Look, I've been here with my family. I've been here with my family for 18 years. I remember indeed celebrating the coming of the millennium just over there in the background over here before this beautiful area was built, and watching the fireworks, and my two little ones that are now bigger ones are now self-sufficient and off into the world. And I ride my bike over here. I live at Kilcare, and that's a very painful and rude way of getting up in the morning. And I come here and it's a kind of an oasis and a bit of a break before I have to drag myself back over to Kilcare up that awful hill called Wards Hill Road of a Sunday morning. I never ever try and do it outside of a Sunday morning because there are just too many people on the road and they're looking at their mobile phones, which is what I'm paranoid about. I don't care if they're drunk or if they're young, but if they're looking at their mobile phones, I'm really worried about it. Which brings me to this sort of problem that we're all in. Isn't it funny to go back to 2000 and then go to here? We don't stop and think of how much change has happened in our business and personal lives in that short period of time. In the period of my children growing up and your children growing up, so much has changed. A few things, a few stakes in the ground. 2007, 2008, when this then alive Steve Jobs decided to put a phone, a computer really, and he called it a phone, in our hands. And then Google and various other people came to the party. We had mobile phones before then. We looked at them around about half an hour a day before the iPhone came along. Today, we look at them, don't say it, we look at them around about 4.5 hours a day. That's incredible, isn't it? I mean, now this is average, but I know that the younger you are and the more au fait you are with it, the more you use. So there's a great sociological change. If you're an advertiser, of course, you've cottoned onto this perhaps, because you're always looking for eyeballs and ears to influence people to come your way and buy or interact with you. So that world has changed, and that's our generation that's changed that. And we are in such massive and rapid change at the moment that sometimes it feels almost hopeless to keep up. But I always say the good things are the basics stay the same, relationships stay the same. We all love something like this where we actually touch and feel and handshake people. We all do love that, and I think the dichotomy of this whole digital world is just like the so-called global village. The more the world becomes connected, the more we like people. The more we make decisions based on people that are different than the digital images that we see otherwise. So there's a business thing, and I'm big into that. I think relationships still do matter a great deal. But look, I'm going to talk to you about a few things today. I wanted to talk to you about the macro and the micro. I need to confess that I do get heavily involved in trying to influence people's policies, i.e. governments of various persuasions, to try and influence their policies to make it more livable, exciting or opportunistic at the micro level. So I was heavily involved in getting the NBN up here on the Central Coast, among other things. I set up a startup called Youth Connections at one stage, which grew, and we set up a huge facility up on Mount Penang and employed many hundred people at the time. We did that on the back of policy. I've been involved in trying to convince the council to do various things, good for small business, good for technology. I'm always into the MPs, reminding them about the importance of mobile phone coverage. I'm always involved in innovation, and I head up an organisation, the Regional Industry Technology Group, called Coastal Connections, soon to be called Start IT Central Coast. Anyway, I think there's a great thing to connect the big questions with the small questions. So to go back down to my humble small business, it's been around for 15 years. At the moment we're based inside the Central Coast Leagues Club up the top. So we rent offices at the top of the Leagues Club. We have a studio up there and several office spaces, and we're there for one reason. We're there because it has extremely fast internet that I helped install inside the Leagues Club. So I did a little deal with the Leagues Club. I said, I'll get you very good fibre, multiple fibre connections into your building if you let me rent some space at the top that they had spare. So I kicked out the board from their boardroom, and we have that as a studio. Bob's been in there before, and we allow anyone to go in there. It's got a big green screen. It's a bit rough and ready, but if you do want to produce video or audio or whatever it may be, or stream an event, you're very welcome to use that at a very low price. It's there and it's available. We've had the ABC use it. We've had a whole series of people use it. It's very good for streaming events. That is to say, if you want to stream to a large amount of people across the world or the country, you can do that very efficiently. So that's where my little business is. We love to say we can help you do anything in that space, but we specialise very much in complex programming to bring rewards. So look, I won't show you everything, but you may know about a relatively small business in Gosford, because I'm in Gosford because it hurts. Because it hurts, and it hurts inside my Leagues Club because there's still quite a lot of poker machine playing going on, and I'm upstairs opposite the area where you're allowed to smoke and play poker machines, and people do start there sometimes very early in the morning, and I walk in there and I go, God, we're going to change this place somehow. And they are changing. The Leagues Club is changing. The Leagues Club has now got a thing called Monkey Mania for kids. It has a creche, it has a gym, hot yoga, and it also has a new business that we've helped start up, which is called Clip and Climb. Clip and Climb is a climbing gym. It was a small business that started in New Zealand, of all places, but you can now climb with your young at heart up these 28 climbing walls, all very colourful, with a kind of a safety belt on. You can fall off. It's really very cool, but of course it was inside this bunker. It's a place where Club Troppo used to be, for some people who know about about that.
Steady on, Pete.
That's right. I went there once and I went, whoa. So it's inside there, but the question is, how do you build a small business up like that? There's two gentlemen there that invested together with the Leagues Club in this franchise, and it was a bit of a risk because it was inside this, no one knew about it. It's never been done before in Australia. They bought it out from New Zealand. Well, 18 months on, it's by far the most profitable business, cash flow business, I think, in Gosford CBD. It's stunning. School, every time it rains, after school, sometimes before school holidays, it is a wonderful, wonderful cash, or not cash, but it's a wonderful cash flow business. Now we have 60% of everybody goes online, they go online, they find the vacant booking, you book it, you pay for it, you come, your ticket's there, and you walk straight in, you get a safety demonstration, and away you go for 1.5 hours. And the fellows that bought the franchise, as it were hurting, but where we moved a lot of the transactions online and the promotions of it online, we suddenly have people streaming through the door. The Leagues Club are a little bit jealous because they just basically walk straight up the stairs, past the restaurants, past the gambling, and they just go straight to Clip and Climb. I love it. I think it's fantastic. And there's thousands of people that go through it. But of course there's a methodology behind all of that, which I think is quite symbolic. How do you get something that's really cool known to the world? How do you get something new that people are a bit sceptical about known to the world? Well, I'll give you a few tips on that. First of all, I believe you really have to get the real pitch right. What is the reality of it? What are the relationships? For example, we went after the families and the kids who really loved climbing on those climbing walls. They loved it. The teenagers and others. And we photographed them and we had them, the families, write wonderful words about that. That is gold. It's not different than any other business. But now comes the fun bit. We need to propagate that across the world. The big thing is Google. You need to think about Google not in a search sense. You need to think about it as a map. Google Maps is how people, if you have a walk-in business, how people will find you or reference you or rate you or share you around. It's free to register if you can work it out, and it is free. You can stumble your way through and register your business there, and it will give you a pin. More so than that, you can actually put photographs on it, and if you're really good, you can actually do a 3D walkthrough of your facility. Now there are people here, associates of mine, that will do walkthroughs. They will actually film or take photographs of 3D walkthroughs of your establishment. If that's something that's attractive for some businesses, car yards, gyms, even public places, you can do that, much like you do when you go to Google Maps and you walk around the streets. You can do that in a semi-commercial sense by embedding that onto it. People love that. They love to see things. If you're new, they want to have a look. They want to read, they want to see faces, they want to see how that's happened. On top of that, you do have to promote on Google, so you need to get your copyright right. You need to tell your story, and I believe you need to spend a little bit of money intelligently paying for some of the ads at the top of searches in Google and other words. Of course, you need Facebook once you're engaged, so people can share and tell people what's going on. Another relatively free device. And Instagram absolutely need to for visual things like that. Such cool shots, really visuals. Instagram is the visual medium of the day and very powerful. There's several others I won't talk about, Snapchat, etc., which are lots of fun. So there's an example of something that's in a bunker, in a forgotten city, as it were, on the East Coast, I'm not even going to say what I think about the Leagues Club smoking and pokies machine place. You can do remarkable things in unusual places if you organise yourself and project yourself digitally. So the lessons were, make sure you get your story really right. It has to be real, it has to be sincere. And then you build that capital, as it were, at the base, and then you project your digital story. In all the years that I do this, the story, the real story, is the most important thing. It's just like in politics. If you get a really good policy, you can talk all sorts of things on top of it. If the policy's pretty weak, and I won't talk about ones that I know about, if they're weak, it's really hard to spin the bullshit. But if it's a good story, if it's a good policy, if it's a good idea, you can stand on it, and this authenticity does shine through. And I believe a lot of people, increasingly the young, have their BS filter on when they're looking online. More and more they know what is spin and what is not, and they are increasingly aware of if you're trying to market to them or if you want to tell them a story that's authentic. And that's not a very digital story, but I think it reflects everything on the way up, whatever you're trying to do. Be real, be real, be real all the time and be sincere, which is a wonderful thing, I think, in the digital world where we seem to be fake news, you know, rigged elections, etc., etc. That'll happen for a bit, but people will wise up after a while and they will want the real thing. So I'm appealing to you, whatever you do digitally online, just be extremely real in how you're going to project it. And then everything else kind of works itself out. But, you know, that's my micro story, where you can turn something that's relatively, you would think is very unlikely to succeed, into something that's very successful. I invite you to go along there, pop your head in, they'll give you a tour. If you have kids or grandkids, have a look. It's really very cool. Do a search online. It's called Clip and Climb or Rock Climbing or whatever you want to put in your search engine, you'll find it, because we've made sure it's everywhere. If you just write the word rock into Google, you'll probably be there.
If they put some poke machines in the wall, then you can climb up and...
The one at the top with the jackpot, if you get there. It's all changing at the Leagues Club, which is kind of fun. And I hope to be back here in about 6 to 12 months' time and tell you about a whole new program that we're trying to do at the Leagues Club to do with supporting innovation, our startups and a smart work hub. We'll talk to you about that we're working on at the moment. But hey, I wanted to also talk to you about innovating, not just at this level, the level that's fun, I find it lots of fun, but also innovating at the top level. You know, because you know, this top level is really, the more I work, the more I see that the top level actually does need to connect with these businesses that I was just talking about, your businesses. There needs to be synergies between this and this. I believe the stories have to be similar. And the reason I say that is my ambition up here on the Central Coast, and has been for 20 years, is to make this the innovative new Sydney town. Not old Sydney town, new Sydney town. We can be everything Sydney is not in many regards. We can be transport efficient, we can still have our clean air, we can have wonderfully fast telecommunications, we can have a plethora of small startup businesses, we can have a new university campus, we can have top education in independent and public schools, and we really can shine because we have the basis of doing that. Sydney increasingly has become gridlocked in its sort of hyper growth mode, and everybody from offshore particularly gravitates to this market. Well, I think that we can be something that's very much not Sydney in that regard. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about a tour that I took last year and I'm about to take again if I get this going, and it's a smart regions tour, smart cities tour that that'll come on shortly, hopefully. So smart cities, you may have heard that phenomena around the place. Smart cities is a concept out in the world where municipalities, cities are starting to say, thank you, right, thank you. That's wonderful. I think we can innovate at a regional level, at a high level here. So I'm going to bring up Singapore, Helsinki, Oslo, Trondheim and Tallinn. Some of those you will know, one of them you probably don't know. Or two. Thank you. Now, you use your imaginations there a little bit. Most of you have been to Singapore. Most of you have probably watched the growth of Singapore through the time. It's a very interesting city. It's, it has no natural resources. Effectively, it builds itself on the talents of its people. It's been an impressive growth over the last 50 years. Breaking away from Malaysia, breaking away in that regard, being isolated, being in a perpetual state of war because they thought the Malaysians were going to invade at any particular point in time. It has a sort of a semi-democratic government because it was always in hyper war mode. But today when you go to Singapore, they've realised a couple of things, and which impresses me particularly. They are extremely invested in high-speed broadband. Now, it seems to be banal, but there in Singapore you can order a gigabit, that is to say a multi-gigabit network fibre connection to your apartment or your business at around about $70 a month. Now this is synchronous, very fast. What does that mean? Well, it sounds all techie and silly, but I'll come back to it. They've also invested in a couple of other things. They've invested very heavily, in my observation, in cultural things that bring people together. They do that on 3 levels. One of it is their sort of business level, where their networking is insane. I mean, here we have a wonderful, digestible business network. Singapore is almost indigestible because its business networks are so complex and so meshed together, but very, very organised. They also have done that in the cultural arena and I think increasingly in the sporting and entertainment arena. If you fly into Singapore now, this image is of their new stadium. All around their stadium they have physios, businesses, they have medical facilities, they have the soccer stadium in the middle where their team is pretty average but doesn't matter. It covers itself up, but it's used for entertainment, culture, it's used for opera, it's used for all sorts of things. The design of the whole thing allows people to come in and out of it, much like Melbourne, but in a sort of a more compact fashion. It's a place that people meet. And I think that's a really big deal with smart cities, that people need to meet up. Remember I was talking about this relationship thing? They really need to meet up. But they need really cool facilities to meet up and reasons to do that. So that's where they have their rock concerts and various other things.
It's funny, Dave, a friend of mine who was the head of the ground at Central Coast Stadium.
Yep.
Is now the head of the ground at the Sydney
Is that right?
Stadium. He said it's phenomenal. The technology involved in changing the grass. It's just all thrown under the stadium and they bring it up. It's amazing. It's the technology.
And the ambition is something about it. Their ambition level is fantastically high, and that's a sort of a thing I think we need to raise our ambition level somewhat here. But you know, to me, it could be anything really. It could be the Roman amphitheatre. The point is, it's a place that people get together. They do business. You know, the businesses behind growing that grass or projecting the opera. There are whole businesses behind that. There's ways that people engage and get involved, get employed and so on. So it's not really just the facility, it's much more. They do have a very big problem though in Singapore, which I've been involved in for 20, 30 odd years, and that is air pollution. They have a really bad air pollution problem, and you know at various times of the year the Malaysians, Indonesians and so on burn their forests, or people in those countries burn their forests. It swings over Singapore, and it's to such an extent that they do have about 5 or 6 days a year where they say do not go outside at all. Do not go outside. It's so thick you can't see the tops of buildings or even halfway up the buildings. They have a real challenge with that. Very interesting though, the work that they're doing and the motivation they're doing to turn that whole thing around. They have monitoring devices over the entire island to tell you in real time how poor quality the air is or how good the quality air is. It's inside shopping centres, it's outside shopping centres. You're on your mobile phone, you know your air quality. I think that's increasingly going to be a big deal in Asia in particular. Here we are in blessed Umina, where we don't have those issues in the southern hemisphere. But very interesting part of the world. There are some parts on the Central Coast that do suffer air quality problems, and that's up near the power stations at Eraring and so on, with the coal dust and so on. But we don't know about it. Anyway, look, the point is with Singapore, I think that they've got very good broadband, they have a cultural hub, and they have some really great big environmental challenges. All of this, remember, broadband builds on the relationships that they build around there. If I come into Singapore, I go to the football game, before too long I'll be back at an office and I will want to continue that interaction with the people in a very high speed manner. I'll be moving. So broadband is there to enhance relationships. Anyway, I know I get a bit esoteric with my discussion, so I'll move on. Fly across Russia, go into the best airport in Europe, which is Helsinki. That's my favourite. I go there all the time. It's small, it's like Adelaide Airport. You get in there and you can go anywhere in Europe within an hour. It's fantastic, because if you look at the geography of Europe, Helsinki's right at the top and you can just dip into Europe really easily. It's fantastic. The Finns are very efficient, clean, straightforward, and they've got lots of art all around the place, and I kind of like it. And there's a port, you go in and you go into Helsinki. You can jump on a boat and you do the tours around the skerries there. It's really fantastic. And they're really entrepreneurial people with huge challenges. They've had huge challenges. When the Soviet Union fell apart, Finland had 30–40% unemployment because most of their trade was, for the West, went through Finland and into the Soviet Union and back. Blew them away. They had a little problem there, so they started building things. There was a gumboot manufacturer who did quite well for a while. I had them, I still have them at my farm over in Norway, our farm. It's on the gumboots it says Nokia. They used to make gumboots. They used to make timber products. It's fantastic. And anyway, they got into telecommunications. And being organised, they did reasonably well at it for many years, as you would be aware. So that's a Finnish company, did very well. They, everything there is a few things I'll touch on about Helsinki. Is first of all, you may have heard that they're experimenting with what's called the universal basic income. There's a section of Helsinki where they're going to say, we're not going to pay any welfare at all anymore. We're going to give everybody in that precinct a basic income. They have to do things for it, like they can't not work or anything, but you get a basic income, everybody gets it, and then you're allowed to top up your income whichever way you wish. It was a way of bringing people's living standards to a certain level and then allowing them to operate on the top of it. Their argument is it's actually going to be cheaper to not run a bureaucracy but to actually give people a basic income to boost their economy. It's happened, it's just started a couple of months ago, and really interested to see how that goes. The whole of the world is looking at that. Very interesting sort of social models. More importantly than that, they have startup hubs all over the place. Businesses like yours would be booked into schools, primary schools and high schools every month. People go in to schools all the time doing things. Whatever you do, if you're a manufacturer or if you're a software programmer, you are asked and almost obliged, if you have a skill set, to contribute back to your local schools. You're expected to. It's not kind of legislated, but like the way we do with volunteering, schools expect the local businesses and professionals, universities, to go into the schools at a very young age, even at preschools, and set up educational regime. I think that's fantastic. And it's really exciting to go to, because you have people who are obviously not educators going into schools and being helped by others. Very interesting, and there's, they use that at the basis of their educational attainment, and you'll know the Finns, as far as science, technology, maths and arts, are at the top of our OECD levels every time, if you have a look at the results out of schools. Fascinatingly high. And it's nothing to do with testing, it's to do with they really engage their business and professional communities in their schools. Really, really interesting stuff. I'd love to see that happen here. Look, I won't go too much on about that, because there's startup funds, there's all sorts of things there. There's huge community access. I'll go to Oslo. I'm just going to throw this one. That's over in Norway. You just go across the Baltic. And interesting enough, do you know that 30% of all cars in Norway now are electric or plug-in hybrids? 30%. The biggest selling luxury car in Norway by far are Tesla and a fully electric BMW. Fully electric. They are, this was last year's statistics, it's just booming. All the top manufacturers make fantastic electric cars that look great, accelerate well and last a long time. Don't be told that they're not. They make them in the factories in Europe entirely. This was a row of entirely electric cars, from VW to smart cars to Mercedes-Benz and various others, Toyotas. They all make beautiful electric cars. And the municipalities have plug-in places all over. Where you go to work, you just plug in, away you go and move it. They've encouraged that again because, well, the kids pinch it. That'd be right. Oh, just like the iPhone charger. Holy moly. It's great. It's really cool, but they've built a whole industry about it. That's the smart thing about it. They've built a whole industry about this whole thing. And it's happening, and that's it, we can do it, we could do that, and these things happen, and they did it for the same reason Singapore has done it. Air pollution in Oslo and the big cities is really bad because of diesel cars. Most, in the winter in particular, there's very little wind in Norway and much of Scandinavia, except for Bergen, where it's windy and rainy all the time, but many of the places, so of course you get this accumulation of air pollution. Really high levels of air. So electric cars were in fact a way of two things, really reducing their air pollution levels. So they're all wanting air like us, which is interesting. Anyway, they're all going to phase out fully conventional cars in 8 years' time. You won't be able to buy a diesel or petrol car in Norway in 8 years' time. And then one of my favourite little fairyland cities in the world, you must go to it, is called Tallinn, in a little place called Estonia, which is just next to Finland, just next to Russia, and the whole Russian army is sitting on the borders, sitting there waiting to. We might just wander in there again, like we did for several years. It's a beautiful place, and you can get it on a ferry ride from Helsinki to Tallinn in an hour, on a wonderful, beautiful catamaran that streams across the Baltic, and you go into this. You can't really see it there, but I'll send it to Elizabeth. The picture is beautiful. It's the only city in Europe that's never been entirely bombed by any war for the last 400 or 500 years. It's gorgeous, except for once, where the Russians and the Germans had a bit of a fight up the back here. But other than that, it's untouched. Very interesting, very, very interesting city. I go there all the time. They have a program called citizenship, electronic citizenship. I'm an electronic citizen of Estonia. So what is that all about? Well, what it is about, it in fact people allows you to set up a tax account, because they all have a set up a bank account, set up a business, and fly in there for 3 months a year. And because they're in the EU and also have a relationship with Russia, you can actually start selling things on an equal tax basis to the whole of the European Union and also a whole lot of the Russian Confederation. It's a fascinating trade port, very, very interesting, and run by, it's only 1.5 million people down there, Estonia, and is starting a thing that they call e-government, where they're trying to simplify government in a big way, and they've managed to do that in a great way. I invite you to have a look at it. One thing they're really, really good at is privacy, weirdly. The story of Estonia is fascinating. Remember, they lived under a rather oppressive regime for some time that knew everything that everyone did. So when they reinvented themselves in the 90s, they wrote up some beautiful legislation that said, you can go in and look at my data, my mobile phone banking, my speeding data, my speeding fines, my health data, but you have to do one thing. You have to leave a signature of who's been into my data. So if I'm there, I have an account there. If someone looks at my data, it actually says so-and-so looked at it. The police force looked at it, or the health records, or the insurance company, or the bank looked at it. So it goes both ways. It's a really interesting thing. So it's not a one-way thing. That's how they've dealt with privacy. Say, it's fine for a police officer to check out my bank accounts, as long as you just leave a little tag that I've got in and had a little bit of a look around. Look, as I said, I'm My last one here is my other hometown in Trondheim, which looks awful from here. It's shocking. That's shocking. It's at 63 degrees north. It's along the Atlantic coast. It's the old capital of Norway. It's about 1,100 years old or thereabouts. It's big on environment as well, with electric vehicles and so on. But most importantly, and this is one for the Central Coast, it has a cluster of its own run tertiary institutions. It has, about 80 years ago, they managed to get a tertiary institution in town, which is called the National University of Science and Technology, and that changed the city forever. Arguably the same way as Newcastle. I think we need one here. I seriously need a tertiary institution that is based here with people like yourselves on the board and the advisory groups telling them how we need to train our young people and connect with professionals and businesses. I go to cities like that. All smart regions and cities have their own run tertiary institution because they define their own future and their research. In here, I would suggest it would be marine research. Music and culture is a massive industry on the Central Coast, maybe sport, but also small manufacturing and services industries. Why aren't we training, why aren't you all involved as lecturers or guest lecturers in a Central Coast based institution? That would be happening in smart cities and regions around the world, and I think we could do that in the not so distant future. So this is why I think these overarching important things: very fast broadband, tertiary institutions, ambitious industries and educational expectations are going to be really important for us. I know inside your hearts and guts, I know you get up in the morning sometimes and you say, if I only had support, if I only had the platform, I could really change a preschool education, or I could really change the way they manage the bush care, or I really know I could change their health education. I know I could do it because I have those skills. These are us at the bottom here, as it were. I know we could change these things. I could change how we do real estate. I know I've got an idea, but I haven't been connected. And you know, we're bumping into each other and forming alliances, and that's brilliant. But I think that we need to have another conversation up here. I think we need to have a few things that we really latch onto. In my mind, it's telecommunications is really important. We've got to keep pushing on this NBN thing big time. You were compromised, unfortunately, a little bit around here. We need to revisit that and get you back to really full, as much fibre as possible, because that's just the speeds that are going to be expected in the future require that. I think we need our own tertiary institution that can engage industry in particular, not necessarily university as in a theoretical university, and much more around a German or Czechoslovakian model, which is much more tech, as it were, like hands-on stuff, much more applied research. I think we need these things, and I think we really need to raise our ambition levels as far as not being Sydney. Like, we should fight for this clean air, and we should tell everyone who comes up here, if you want your children to grow up in clean, beautiful air, and you want to go and walk to school, or you want to take a bus to school, and if you want to go to the beach or go for a bushwalk, or we need to really articulate that that's us. That is us. Otherwise, we will increasingly become seen as a suburb of Sydney, and therefore all of those Sydney problems increasingly will come up here with very, very large amounts of traffic or density or whatever it may be. Some of which is fine, but planned is really good. So we could be something else. So look, I've been involved in a series of those things. I know people in the room have too. Sorry for being kind of esoteric, because I'm a little bit like that. If you've got a few questions, but this is what I'm attempting to do. I'm attempting to join this with this.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with dropping things like our farm in Norway, and this is my second home there. What is your connection with the Scandinavian?
Well, I was an athlete once, and I could run actually reasonably fast, not fast enough to get into a senior national team, but we used to did exchanges between the Norwegian athletic team and in my case South Australia. When they had winter, they can't really run because there's too much ice around. So they used to just come over here, holers, bowlers, the whole team. Anyway, I went back there, I worked there, you know, the whole story, and then I kind of fell in love and I got stuck. And I went to university there, and then I had my 2 children there. So that's the reason. And my wife goes there for 3 to 6 months every year to help out on the farm, and I have to go up, and this year I have to repair a grass roof. So I've been given 2 weeks to repair a grass roof. We're totally non-tech at all, but they're beautiful. Grass roofs are very efficient, although they're very high up in the air, which is a problem.
We were talking about their technology saying that we need to bring this together.
Yes.
In theory, that's all fine, bringing that together, and obviously, quite a few small businesses around here are interested in getting together. We've seen the SBNG because we're getting more and more members again, whilst the bend down on stage is coming up, so the need for a small business to get together is there. However, the problem that I see was that, how do you actually get people to work on it? Because most of the people who come here, we've got some really great members who will do their own presentations and all these sort of things. For the rest, in general speaking, people tend to, I'm so very well, yes, I agree, but how
do we
do
do?
you get them to do it?
Well, I've got a little idea for you. I challenge you collectively to, both collectively as a group and otherwise, to have some opinions about some important things. The council elections are coming up, on the policies that some of the people are going to stand there for. What are some of the ideas that they have? I challenge you to have an opinion about telecommunications. I challenge you to have an opinion about local education. And it doesn't have to be a party politicised opinion, it just has to be a well-rounded, authentic opinion about things that you know work. Because your voice matters. A whole series of people and decision makers, and I walk into their offices very often and hassle them, oh, here you are again. I'm going, no, just listen. And the quality of their decisions is very much based on the information that they receive from people like yourselves. Without that, now I don't care what party they come from, because in my world they are vehicles for getting to the same place, and they stumble a little bit, both of them. But the quality of those people will be on your opinions, your authentic opinions about issues. So I challenge you to don't be overtly party political, be policy based and tell them from the base what the real deal is. There's an answer, Elizabeth. And collectively as a group or individually, I think is very powerful.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Assuming we continue on the way that we are on the Central Coast, what are some of the things that will impact on us, whether we like it or not, from a technology future point of view?
Well, some of us will hit a glass ceiling as far as the quality of our telecommunications is concerned. I'm concerned about radio signal up here, which is very poor. I'm very concerned about the television reception up here, which is very poor. Some of you do or don't get these receptions. More importantly though, I am concerned about our mobile and broadband networks that are in places atrocious. Now that matters not just for you as producers of knowledge and services, it matters as consumers of products that will require increasingly reliable and fast internet speeds. If you want to sell your services to someone remotely who may be up in the Glenning Valley or wherever it may be, they need the services so you can deliver your products to them. So having a ubiquitous, really good telecommunication system is not geeky, it's important for your services to be able to deliver to their homes, whether it's health, education, financial or whatever it may be. We all need to have this infrastructure so that we can be bound together. Remember the lessons of Singapore? is when they're bound together really tightly with really good networks, you can do amazing new types of business that we don't even think about now, but are certainly there.
As far as I can see, there's always lots of opportunities with progression on the Central Coast, and I think, I think I spoke about it a few years ago about what is missing from the Central Coast as a central identity hub, like Gosford, which Gosford used to be, and Newcastle is as a regional city, and Newcastle are getting it back again. Gosford is struggling to become an identity, and I think that's where these politicians and policymakers are missing the point completely. The community here on the coast is growing enormously, and we just seem to be bypassing the important issues, and we take up other issues that you'll see tomorrow being bandied about. And it's such a shame because Gosford could be such a great identity for the Central Coast again, and really drive that growth and drive that forward projection. So it's a real.
You're spot on, Steve. You're so spot on. Identity is really important. That's why I said this new Sydney town thing. Look, that's my thought. But the thing is, we are different. We are quite special in some regards, and we can define ourselves by not being Sydney, by being all the good things you remember. We're on the Pacific Rim. Everyone knows that the next century is all about the Pacific Rim. It's all about from here all the way to Korea, Japan. It's all the way to Canada, all the way down to South America. This is where the action's going to happen on the planet in the next 100 years. And we're right here, and we've got clean air, and if we have super fast broadband and great schools, we'll be the actual winner of that whole game, rather than the congested winner that Sydney has increasingly become. So we can be a different model. And I agree, Gosford has to happen. And, it's got to happen.
Because the whole thing there too is quite right, because the thing with Central Coast, of course, it's bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And you take Sydney Water, then first whilst they have nearly walls down, they can telecommunications on both sides.
They have a central point, don't they?
What they have that we don't have any data on the Central Coast that I can think of is the equivalent of Clark Key, because it doesn't matter how busy you are, with your businesses everywhere, do whatever, use all your technology, but at the end of the day, you've got your relationship building because you all go to Clark Key.
That's right.
That's the sort of thing. I think that is very hard to do because it's so all over the place.
Basically saying there's no centralised hub, which is true. Gosford used to be that for many people. We don't have that. Now we're stuck in villages and valleys around the place. Another thing, just parting moment, Mike, just before I go, I particularly do support a united council for two reasons. I sat and I was chair of Regional Development Australia here on Central Coast for some years, and one observation I had is the Gosford and Wyong Council used to spend so much time fighting each other. When they went down to Macquarie Street or down to Canberra, they were a divided force, and therefore they were picked off. Whether they were arguing about water or whatever it may be, or transport or who's going to get what money. Now, although it was a clumsy way of uniting the two councils, which I think was clumsy, we are one now, and I think that we do have a chance of forging that identity you talked about, and uniting. If that person is relatively, that team is relatively well articulate, they can go to Macquarie Street and they can say, I represent 350,000 people, 4 or 5 state electorates, 2 federal electorates, and I would like this to happen. Now, brave will they be to say no to a united council that says that? Brave will they be? And I don't think they will be. So as long as you do get a united voice there, I think that all of these things we talked about are actually extremely possible right now, because it's we're in a new space now. We're in a new space. Yeah.
I read some interesting data on population. The Central Coast is the 9th most populous area in the whole of Australia. We come in front of places like Darwin. We've got more people on the Central Coast than the Northern Territory and Tasmania.
That's right.
And we're about the size of the ACT.
We don't have one standalone tertiary institution. Canberra has 3. You know, we don't have a whole series of these things that define areas. We do have perhaps one sporting team and one code that helps define some of the region, but we need a really definitive cultural identity so that we can all get behind it. And whether it's based in Gosford or elsewhere, I'm not sure, but I think there's a really great opportunity coming up to do it. Look, I'll confess I've been part in trying to hurry up some really intelligent policy. It's called a community plan that a bunch of people over the coast have been working on for 6 months. Keep an eye out for it. It's a policy document that we're going to give to all prospective councillors, and it covers 18 different policy areas from business, economy, environment, pensioners and disability, etc., youth, employment. So keep an eye out for it, have a look, and I think you can even chip in and write some suggestions if you wish.
Well, I must say from the outset, I do thank Bob for inviting you to come along today, and I really appreciate it, Bob, so thank you for that. And also please join me in thanking David for coming on today.
Thanks guys. Thanks.